It's the center of the universe, something so vital and beautiful, yet ominous and uncaring. An idyllic community surrounded by water can be a place for relaxation, but also terror. Indie filmmaker Dean Jacobs tells us more about a real-life place and what horrors can happen in such lakeside resort towns.
Hi, my name is Dean Jacobs. I am a filmmaker, more specifically, a writer, actor, director, and producer. And so that's what I do. I sort of am a wearer of many hats, sometimes reluctantly, but to get a film made, sometimes you need to do more than one thing. So broadly, I am a filmmaker. Film. My feature film debut was a film called The Trip, and that is very much a slasher film, a haunted house story. So that was my first foray into the genre. What got me into the genre? That's a multi-fold answer. The first, I love horror films. I always have. I love getting chills and being uncomfortable and being on the edge of my seat and wondering what's happening next and fearing for these actors in the films. So I've always loved horror films, probably more so than most other genres. I mean, I'm a film lover in general, but I can really get into horror, and it has something to offer everyone. There are so many different kinds of horror film genres and subgenres. Films that are campy and funny and over the top and schlocky and not too serious. And then on the other end, there's some that are really intense and, really spine tingling and can't take your eyes off them. So I just love the genre. And also, as a filmmaker starting out, making a decision as what's going to be my first feature film, horror is a genre that has one, a built-in audience, and two is very forgiving. You can make, and people do make, low budget indie horror films, and people will watch them. If you're a filmmaker and you want to look to get your toes wet in making movies, horror is a good place to start. Um, yeah, the setting for the film is Lake Arrowhead, California, like an hour and a half outside of LA. Story started um, cultivating in my brain because my friend lived up there. He and his wife at the time had a really nice place in the middle of basically the woods, walking distance from the lake. And we would go up there on the weekends and hang out and spend time. And that's where the story started. I started noticing things about the area and about the history and the past. And there was something pecking at the back of my brain saying, I think there's a story here. I think you could write something. And so I took the historical facts surrounding this place and I wove in a fictional story into it. Without giving too much of the story away, Lake Arrowhead is a tourist destination. It's a place for the industry people of LA to escape, which is not too far from LA proper, to go up into the mountains for the weekend and get away. It's a place that's been around since the turn of the 1900s. It has mob ties, old history there. The town itself has burnt down more than one occasion, and one of the times was intentional by the entity that runs the town. Did something which is called a burn to learn exercise, and they burnt the entire town down. Right there is enough of a mystery. And then you add on the fact that the lake itself is private. There's fences around everything. If you've never been there, you wouldn't know that because it's not advertised. But once you get there, you're like, oh, this is really weird. Like, I come up to this resort community to enjoy the lake, but I don't have any access to the lake. So that.
I see you have some famous faces appearing, Lynn Lowry and Michael Berryman. Is there anything
Yeah.
special you can tell me about them two, plus the rest of your cast?
Yeah, those two names right off the bat are really big gets as far as horror films go. you might not recognize, especially if you're not a huge horror you might not recognize the names, but especially Michael Berryman's face, you'll know him. But they've been in the genre for years and years and years. And if you are a horror head, you do know those names, and you do know those faces, and you do know the films that they've been in. And I'm going to play to their strengths. I'm going to use them in a way in this film that is going to leave the audience satiated. Uh, so I have some really exciting things for them, and I'm excited to introduce their characters to the world. The rest of the cast, whether you like it or not, I'm one of the cast members. Katie Bentz is the other lead actress. She's a really talented actor in Los Angeles. I met her on a commercial shoot for Ring security cameras years ago, and we stayed friends. And so when I started writing this script, I had her in mind for the lead role, and so I wrote the role for her. And then another actor, Evan Sloan, who was in my first film, The Trip, is going to be in this film as well. He's going to be a producer on the film. And so that is most of the cast. I still have one lead cast member that I am anticipating being another one of those horror legends. I have a couple people in mind, just sort of finalizing offers and seeing which way the cookie crumbles. So that is the cast as it stands right now. For the most part, I don't find it that hard. Sometimes I've had this question before, and sometimes I just sort of have to remind myself what I'm doing in that moment. So if I'm an actor in a scene, I have to make sure that I'm present in that scene and performing the role of an actor rather than being a director or any other aspect that I have to do on set. I love doing all of it. I love every aspect of making movies. I started as an actor. While I was writing, I was only writing for myself most of the time. I wasn't really sharing my writing with anybody. I was earning my living as an actor. So that's what came first. And then I sort of branched out. And when it came time to make my own film, make my first feature film, I just sort of fell into the role of producer because no one's going to do the work for you. And producer is a really broad term. Producers do a whole lot of different things on films. And that's sort of what I learned, is that the producer hat, is the one you put on first to get a film made, and the one you're wearing throughout the whole process. So, I love it all. And it was sort of throughout the course of making my first feature film, it was realizing that I had to take on more responsibility than I first anticipated having to do. I think I like writing the best. I like telling the story first, writing the story, and everything else is a byproduct of that, So it's rewarding to get to those next steps in the process, to be on camera, to deliver the lines that I wrote, and see other people performing those actions. But the writing is the thing that comes first, and it's the storytelling is what's the thing that I really love.
Do. When you start writing your stories, I'm assuming you imagine what this will look like in your head before actually filming it. Are there any scenes that translate, how do I word this? Are there any scenes that translate directly into the movie that we're going to see? For example, um, if you're writing, oh, we're overlooking Lake Arrowhead, will you have a corresponding like, oh, this grand drone shot over the whole lake?
Yeah, absolutely. That's sort of how um, I work. Is I'm sort of an image-based person. I see the shot, or the images in my mind as I'm writing them. And so if you've watched the concept trailer that's out, you'll see it opens with some really nice drone shots of the car traveling up the mountainside towards Lake Arrowhead. That's something that, one, I pulled from The Shining, because the best or the most sincere form of flattery is imitation, or whatever the saying is. But that's also an image that was in my mind, is this lone car traveling towards its destination. That's one of the things. The other thing is the lanterns that you see in the concept trailer. And I just had this image of these lanterns being lit up in the middle of a darkened forest, and sort of you just watch the yellow of the lantern light going through the darkness. And so that was an early image that I had, and you'll absolutely see that as one of the themes and one of the images that's going to show up on screen in the film. It's almost simultaneous, where I can close my eyes and see it at the same time that I'm able to write it. And so that's the way I work. I'm an image-based storyteller. Hmm.
Take your time.
I don't know how much I can give away. Almost none. I don't think I can give away too many spoilers. You will see, like I said, some really fun scenes with Michael Berryman's character and Lynn Lowry's character. And the idea is that it will feel sort of like an ensemble cast, and I want it to be a feeling where the viewer feels like they are thrown into this world, and you sort of see all the little aspects of the world, and everything's revealed a little bit at a time as we go. So I'm hoping that as a viewer, you will start with a narrow perspective seen through the eyes of our lead characters, and then that world will open up to you as the film progresses, which will eventually lead up to that second act leading into the third act climax, where hopefully you'll be on your edge of your seat by then and waiting to see what's the next thing that's going to happen to these characters. And I will say that the ending, like any good ending, the coup de grace, will really be the explosion of the film, the moment where you're like, oh, did not see that coming. So yeah, I can't really tell you any specific scenes, but I'm expecting to give you a roller coaster ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the good part about my pre-production process is that prior to taking any crowdfunding public, I do a lot of private fundraising. Before anybody saw anything online about a crowdfunding for this campaign, I had already reached out to numerous producers and tied people in. So the cornerstone to make this film is already in place. The funds needed to make this film in a way that's basically stripped to the bone, bare bones, no frills. We can do it that way with the funds already in place. The Kickstarter was launched after that was already set, so that either way we were going to make a movie. And that also helps give credence to the validity of the Kickstarter and of what we're doing, is that the movie's getting made no matter what. The Kickstarter is to make it, to get us the funds to make it in a way that is as close to, as true to our vision as possible. So obviously the more funds that we have, the better movie we can make, the more money we can spend on cast members, the more money we can spend on, the fancy equipment like drones and all those things. I'll be frank, we're 75% funded with 18 or 19 days left to go. We're going to reach the goal. It's going to happen.
Knock on wood. Knock on wood.
I'll knock on wood, but we're going to reach the goal. And if you haven't yet, anybody watching this, if you're looking at any of our social media at Water Rites Film, RITES, you can find the Kickstarter link in our bio. 18 days left to help us get this movie made. But we are not far off. By hook or by crook, we will meet the goal. Independent filmmakers have the freedom to tell the stories the way they want to tell them. They're not beholden to studios. They're not, trying to make bank on the next big sequel or the next reboot. Independent filmmakers truly have the opportunity to tell stories the way they want to tell them. And everyone has a unique story to tell. And I think I am one of those people. I would imagine that I would hope that you see yourself as one of those people too. So any opportunity for a fan of horror movies, a person that loves film in general, to see something that the mainstream isn't offering, to see something that is a product of love and hard work and an original idea, is an opportunity that you don't get a lot of the times through, these big budget films. So a unique story that you haven't heard before is a great reason. So that is my answer.
And that's a really good answer. I like to ask this to everyone that I talk to that has some kind of some kind of project going on. And I don't think I've ever heard that answer before. It's usually something like, it's really fun. We love doing this, which are all great answers,
Mm-hmm.
regardless. But you have a really good point. It's like independent people, they're the best. They can do whatever they want. They can tell the
Yeah.
sky's the limit with independent films. It really is.
And not only that, you know, I I spend a lot of time watching indie films, watching low budget horror, because I love it, but I also love to support the people that are doing it for themselves, that have scraped up the crew, the finances, whatever means they could to get this thing made. I have a lot of respect for anybody that does that. And so I will support that. And I would hope in turn people would support, people like me doing that as well.